So, you're a YouTube theologian. That's cool. I'm glad we have the Sunday drive home today because I preached today on marriage and divorce, which was the gospel text from Mark chapter 10, which I always think you have to preach the hardest text. If you don't preach the hardest texts, I don't say this often, but people will just think you're a wimp. You got to go straight at it. So, divorce, that's a hard text. But that meant that I didn't get to preach my favorite text, which we read as the epistle, Hebrews chapter 2. Hoo-hoo! That was hard. If you're interested in the marriage and divorce sermon, it's got to be on the church website under sermons or something. You can find it there. Oh, and if you're interested in this, we did a woke conference yesterday. Culturally woke versus biblically enlightened, and that's on the podcast, which is, I don't actually know where to find the podcast. What Not the Podcast? I don't know how to find it, but it's on the internet somewhere. You can find it there on the internet. Just wander onto the internet, and I'm sure it'll come up. Anyhow, the point of this Sunday drive home is Hebrews chapter 2, which quotes Psalm 8. And Psalm 8 is this beautiful psalm that talks about how, what is man that you are mindful of him, and the Son of Man, Jesus, that you consider him. You made him for a little while lower than the angels. You exalted him above something. And you put all things under his feet. And that's so great. That Jesus is King of Kings, which is our foundational political point. Jesus is King of Kings. And Jesus is Lord of Lords, which is our chief home or economic point. And Jesus is God of gods. Where was I just reading that? That was in Deuteronomy from the 1-year lesson today from Deaf Church. The Deaf Church, if you want the 1-year lectionary, that's at the Deaf Church. The 3-year lectionary at the Not Deaf Church. Well, mostly Not Deaf Church, St. Paul. So he's God of gods. That's our religious point. Jesus is all of these things, that Jesus sits on the throne and rules and reigns all things for the sake of his church, Ephesians 1, end of the chapter, which is phenomenal. But it says, as of yet, we do not see all things under his feet. Now, here's a spiritual mystery that we've discussed before on the Sunday drive home, or at least I think should have. If we didn't, we should have. And that is that all things are under the feet of Jesus. Sit here at my right hand until I make your enemies your footstool. Psalm 110. He rules and reigns all things. He's seated far above all power and principality and everything else. Ephesians 1. All this is true. Jesus ascended far above all heavens so that he stands above every single authority. But it says in Hebrews 8, we do not yet see all things under his feet. Now think of that. Jesus rules and reigns, but it is his desire that we do not see him ruling and reigning. Jesus sits on the throne, but it's his desire that we don't see him sitting on the throne. Jesus is exalted above the devil and all the demons and all the principalities and all the powers and all this stuff, and yet it's his desire that we don't see it. Oh, how great it will be to see it one day. But not yet, not today. Not according to the Lord's will, not now. Now this is a mystery, but it helps us solve a lot of other mysteries. Because, for example, we're looking around Hebrews 2, verse 8. Got to look at that text, but if you go a little further down, you get another part of my favorite text, which says that just as we partake of flesh and blood, that means, we got this physical nature. He himself also partook of the same, so that through his death he might destroy him who had the power of death, that is the devil, and set all those who were in bondage to the fear of death free. can never remember exactly how it goes, but that's the basic idea. Now that verse tells us that to fear death is to be in bondage to the devil. It also tells us that the devil sets us, that Jesus sets us free from the fear of death by destroying the devil. He himself partook of the same, so that through death he might destroy him who had the power of death, that is the devil. So Jesus destroyed the devil through his death. This is a foundational point of the gospel, a foundational point of the gospel of the New Testament, a foundational point of all of our biblical theology, that Jesus has destroyed the devil in his death on the cross. And yet people say, but what? Now hold on, Pastor. That can't be, because look around. Look at all this bad stuff going on out there. Look at all these wicked things. This has led to a profound confusion when it's come to understanding the timeline or the chronology of Revelation 20, the millennium. Well, so many people say, well, the millennium's not yet, because the millennium starts with the binding of the devil, and obviously the devil isn't bound. But remember how Paul, or whoever wrote Hebrews, sets us up in Hebrews chapter 2 when he says that all things are under his feet, but we just don't see it yet. The devil is destroyed, you don't see it. You're not supposed to see it, you're supposed to believe it. We walk by faith, not by sight. It's like the gap between the thunder and the lightning reversed. You know how thunder and lightning goes? You see the lightning, and then you hear the thunder, and unless it's right on top of you, there's a gap between the two. The closest I was to being struck by thunder was about 15 feet. Me and Andrew were standing on the back patio watching this hailstorm in Colorado, and kablooey! Lightning hit the tree in the corner of the yard, and flaming pieces of bark flew all over. Me and Andrew jumped 2 feet in the air, and I was so amped up, I was running around in the hail and the rain, screaming my head off. Carrie had to come out and say, "What are you nuts? Get inside." It was wild. That was close. If you're that close, there's no gap between the seeing and the hearing, but normally you see the flash and then count 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. That's how we did it as boys, because apparently every Mississippi was a mile away. I think that's probably not accurate. And then boom. Well, with Jesus, it's the opposite. You hear it first, and then you see it. My window looks really dirty. You hear the death of the devil, you hear the destruction of the devil, you hear the binding of the devil, you hear the overcoming of the devil, you hear the triumph of Jesus over sin, death, and the devil. You hear it first, and then on the last day, you'll see it. But the point is that Jesus doesn't want us to see it yet. He wants us to see himself made lower than the angels. That is the Christian vision. That's what's supposed to fill our eyes and our imagination and our thoughts. Christ made lower than the angels, crowned with glory and honor. We're supposed to see Jesus in his humility. That's what he wants us to know. So while we go through the troubles of this world, and while we know that Jesus sits at the right hand of the Father and rules and reigns all things for the sake of the church, while we know that to be true and we confess it to be true week after week, we don't see it yet. We see Jesus on the cross. We see Jesus in his suffering. We see Jesus in his humiliation. We see Jesus wrapped in the arms of the Virgin Mary. We see Jesus in his lowliness. And that is the vision that sustains and keeps us going through these difficult days. It says later on in the Hebrews, fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith. So while we know that he rules and reigns, we want to see that he suffered and died. Which might be why the crucifix is so important, or a picture of Jesus on the cross is so important. That's where we learn rightly to see ourselves. And that's where we learn rightly to see our God. What is man that you are mindful of him? It's Sunday Drive. Hey, if you like this, then you will like this. Hope it encourages you.